For this next activity, you will be matching a differentiated cell in the human body to an organelle that you think best helps that cell achieve its function. So in order to do this, we need to review a little bit about the cell organelles that you learned about in biology. Cytology is a fancy term for the study of cells. All animal cells, including humans, have three main parts. First, the nucleus, the cytoplasm or the cytosol, and the cell membrane. All of the body's functions are carried out by the cell, which are organized into tissues. So if you remember from the levels of organization activity that you did, multiple cells that all sort of carry out similar functions together are called a tissue. All cells within your body vary in size, structure, and function. They all start off the same way in an organism, but eventually will differentiate into specific types of cells. So that way we get all the different cells with different shapes, sizes, and functions. So for example, we have nerve cells, we have blood cells, and these are cells that could either be in your respiratory system or your digestive system. But they all look very different, and they all have different cell structures and different functions. That's what that word differentiate means. They all become sort of specialized to do a certain job. So all cells have a cell membrane. This is also called the phospholipid bilayer. It consists of phospholipids and embedded proteins. And the membrane's job is to regulate or control what enters and leaves the cell. It is selectively permeable, which means that it will give permission, so think of permeable permission, to certain items to enter and other items to stay out. And it does this by these means of these protein channels here, these small protein openings that will allow certain molecules to flow through. The cytoplasm, or cytosol, is the area between the nucleus and the membrane, and this contains all the organelles. Cytoplasm is a term for like the liquid part plus all the proteins and organelles, and cytosol just means the liquid part, but they're sort of used interchangeably. Many of the cell's metabolic reactions occur in this area. If you remember what metabolism is, it is all of the chemical reactions that are necessary to support the life of the cell. Organelles are little organs within the cell that perform specific functions. So first we have the endoplasmic reticulum. It is a transport system. It's full of canals and channels that connect the membrane to the nucleus and to other organelles within the cell, and its function is for transport. Transports items in and around the cell. And there are two main types of endoplasmic reticulum. The smooth ER is primarily for making lipids or lipid-based hormones like estrogen, testosterone. That's the job of the smooth ER. And it also is really important in detoxifying chemicals. The rough ER has ribosomes on its surface, and ribosomes are really important because they make all the proteins in a cell. Next, we have the Golgi apparatus. The job of the Golgi is to package and deliver proteins produced by the ribosomes of the ER. And also, they will modify some of these proteins. So protein will be made by the ribosomes on the rough ER, and then they will travel to the Golgi, where the Golgi will modify the proteins as needed and package them so that way they can be transported throughout the rest of the cell in these structures called vesicles. So the vesicles are kind of like the postal trucks or the big Amazon trucks, and the Golgi is kind of like the post office of the cell. So proteins get sent here, they get packaged up, and they get shipped off into these vesicles to their final destination within the cell. Next, we have the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell. This is where chemical energy from your food is converted into a usable form known as ATP, and this process is called cell respiration. And cell respiration requires glucose, which you get from your food, and oxygen, which you get from breathing. So all of this happens in the mitochondria. It's called the powerhouse of the cell because this is where the energy is made in the cell. So you can almost think of the mitochondria as like the power plant of the cell. Next, we have lysosomes. Lysosomes are very special vesicles that contain enzymes to break down substances. So you can almost think of this as like the stomach of the cell or the digestive system of the cell. These enzymes break down substances such as food or worn out cell parts and even bacteria. So you can see here in this little image, this is a lysosome. It's gobbling up a bacterium and it's breaking up and digesting that bacterium. Next, we have parts of the cytoskeleton. So cyto means cell and skeleton. So you can think of this as like the skeleton of the cell. This provides a lot of structure to the cells, and both two organelles, these two organelles, cilia and flagella, could be part of a cell, and they are both involved with movement. So cilia are these small hair-like substances on the outer surface of the cell membrane, and their job is to move things along outside of the cell. So, for example, in the oviducts or fallopian tubes of the female reproductive system, when an egg is released from ovulation, the egg sort of crowd surfs on these cilia. The cilia push the egg along down into the uterus. You also have a bunch of these cells in your trachea, your windpipe, to help clean out any foreign particles or debris or bacteria that might get into your airways. Flagella are long tails. So, one of the most iconic flagellated cells in the human body is a sperm cell. It's got this long whip-like tail that allows it to swim. And then finally, we have the nucleus. You can think of the nucleus as like the brain of the cell. Its job is to direct the cell activities, and it contains all of the DNA in the cell in the form of chromatin, which is very loosely packed DNA. The nucleolus is typically in the center of the nucleus. It's right here, and it's responsible for the production of ribosomes. And it has tiny pores on the outside of the nucleus. Similar to the cell membrane, it is also selectively permeable, and it allows RNA to enter and exit that nucleus. So for this activity, you are going to read about some specific differentiated cell types found in the body. And each cell is differentiated in such a way that some of the organelles are busier or more abundant than they are in other cells, depending on their function. What you're going to do is on the cell organelle matching cell info page, you're going to read about each of these cell types and their functions. And some of these also include some pictures. And then as you read, you're going to think about which organelle is best going to help this cell achieve that function. So we have some organelles listed in the word bank. Okay, so these are the only organelles that you are going to use for this activity. They can be used more than once, and some of these you could argue could have multiple organelles that will work for that cell type, but as long as you explain your reasoning for that, then you'll get the points. So for example, skin cells, their function is to protect and waterproof your insides, and they produce a number of proteins in order to strengthen the skin, create that waterproof outer coat, and provide some elasticity. And so, therefore, I think the ribosomes would have a very important role in the cell because ribosomes are the protein making organelle of these cells. If you have any questions on this assignment, please send me an email.